relation has this got to do with anything constructive? I mean, are you trying to say that consumption and reproduction in and of itself is inherently bad?
Yeah, in the context of this aberration of it, this manifestation of it. In a context where there's nothing regulating, there's no governor controlling the excesses of the machinery. Yes, in that context, it's a bad thing, okay? Because it will eat itself, it will consume itself, it will destroy itself, it will create waste and loss and nonsense and bullshit and shit. It'll turn to shit, okay? Because it has to be regulated precisely and carefully, because it's meaningful, because it has value, all right? And the value can be destroyed so fucking easily.
Well, I mean, that's just your opinion. Last statement here. The creation of sentient life through evolution by natural selection gives life and the universe meaning by creating a real vulnerability. Pain and pleasure are powerful mechanisms, and in nature's crude, ignorant hands, a waste of ludicrously grotesque proportions is made possible. Nature sucks. Nature sucks because it has no appreciation for the unnecessary and excessive suffering it imposes to satisfy the mechanical ambitions of a reproducing molecule. That you are a part of nature as well. I mean, if you have...
Yeah, well, so what? I'm not validating my existence. Why, my parents got horny, they had a kid, that's it. All right, I'm not validating it. I'm not producing any new life. I'm not investing in it. If somebody said, here, you can make some more people, I'm not going to press the make more people button. All right, because yeah, I have serious concerns of the efficiency of this dynamic. The living process creates need. Okay, you're born into this thing called need. Now, the question is there any need for the need to be created? That's the question. All right, because obviously when we create the need, we end up only satisfying part of it. So we leave a big ball of deprivation floating throughout our community of sentient creatures. There's this huge mass of deprivation that will prevail, because we cannot make a system, or at least we haven't even tried, but it's probably impossible, that can satisfy all that deprivation. There has to be getters and takers, all right? And that's what makes it destructive, because you're always going to have this unfulfilled need, this created need that will not be satisfied, that will just linger like a smelly pustule. It will just fester and rot for eternity.
If you have appreciation for suffering, then you've already contradicted your statement. You know, it doesn't make any logical sense. And you already acknowledge that there is a counterpoint to pain and suffering in nature. You know.
Yeah, what I've acknowledged is it's not a counterpoint. That's the whole fucking point of my argument. All it is what it's the successful getting back to zero. It's getting rid of the deprivation. You get rid of the deprivation, you get this nice feeling. All right? But guess what? That's just getting rid of deprivation. It's just getting back to fucking zero. And you're still stuck with the negatives that you didn't, the deprivation you did not get rid of, the deprivation you did not satisfy. All right? And so fuck that. I mean, pleasure's a great thing, but you sit there and say there's some kind of equal. Okay? Like one piece of blueberry pie is worth 10 baby cub lions getting ripped to pieces. That's your equation. It's not my equation. That's your equation.
Pleasure, happiness, and joy. You know, and what I think you're trying to argue is that suffering is fundamentally more real than pleasure or joy. That pleasure or joy are illusion, but somehow.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much it. I've pointed out that I'm basically saying we're basically addicted. All right, we're driven. Okay, Okay, we're not compelled by its attractiveness, its real value. We're compelled by our addiction, by our perception of value. All right, so I'm not the one who's underestimating the value of pleasure. I'm arguing that the bacteria inside of us has overestimated the value of the pleasure. And it is capable, like I said, we will excuse anything. You can see it in human behavior. We could have a Holocaust tomorrow, 4 billion people could die, and the survivors would just say, well, gee, that was shitty, but, moving on. There's just nothing unacceptable to the addict's brain. He will accept any cost to get the cheese.
Now, suffering is less of an illusion. I fail to see how that isn't completely arbitrary. You know, that is entirely your opinion.
Well, whatever. It's an opinion based on a logical argument. My point is that the negative exists first. There has to be the creation of the need before you can have the satisfaction of the need. All right? That's the argument, is that that's the first creator. The negative is the first existent. Okay? You can only have the positive if you have the negative. You can only do a positive thing if there is negative existing for you to eliminate. Because all positive is basically the elimination of a negative. And if you don't create the negative in the first place, then you don't have to create the positive to fix it.
It's how can somebody disprove it? You know, if you're trying to say that something is an objective fact and you want somebody to disprove it in a logical and scientific way, well, then it has to be something that can be measured.
Yeah, well, look, you can measure things like addiction. We understand that psychology. We see it in things. We can create it. It's not just a metaphor. I mean, it's a real practical reality. Okay? Our need, our drives, our desires are addiction. They are something that compels us to do, to want, to have, to make it necessary that we have. Okay, and that's where we create all this cost and waste, is because we stomp and we crush and we destroy to get what we want. All right, so it's you can make you can make an argument. I'm just saying you're not going to win the argument because you can't win it, because I own the logic. All right, it's patented, it's copied, it's in my pocket. I own it. All right, there's no way you're going to be able to come up with a logical construct that's going to defeat it. That's not the fault of my logic. That's the fault of your position.
Just some opinion. What you're basically saying is anybody who disagrees with your opinion on life has some sort of religious agenda, and that...
Yeah, they have some sort of agenda. So you can just stop at that word. Their agenda is the bacteria again. They're just addicts justifying their addiction. You can't come up with a rational reason to have a child. You can't come up with a rational reason to perpetuate any of it, because the only reason to do it is because of some illusion of value. Okay? But you can't sit there and define the value. You can't define or describe how creating need makes sense. That it makes sense to create need. That it makes sense to create a deprivation. You can't do it logically.
It's just plain bullshit. People are allowed to disagree with you. And you...
Yeah, well, it's not... They can disagree all the fuck they want, but they can't sit there on some mountain and call it Mount Logic and disagree from that position. So what they have to call it is Mount Bullshit. They have to say, well, no, I'm addicted and I want and I like life. I think life is beautiful. The cosmos is beautiful. Or some other bullshit. Okay? It's not a rational, logical argument. I'm so in love with the heroin, there's no way heroin could be bad. I mean, that's not a fucking argument. It's not logical. It doesn't mean anything. So let them stay on the low ground that they belong on. If they're gonna have a position, they're not gonna base it on any kind of argument. If you're gonna say the argument can't be made, well then stay where you belong. Okay? But don't tell me I can't say I have the logic and I can stand on it and I can sit there and point my goddamn finger, and I will say it. I will point my goddamn finger. And I'll say, you have got it motherfucking wrong. And until you build yourself a logical mountain to stand on to say I'm wrong, well then until that point I will look down on you.
Entitled to your opinions, but you're not entitled to your facts.
Yeah, well, you don't provide any facts, so it's not even an entitlement problem. Because you don't provide any. You don't provide any logic to defend what you spoke. You don't describe any fact of nature that says somewhere under a rock, somewhere in nature. This all makes perfect logical sense. No, that's not written anywhere. It's not written in any code of the universe that the universe creates rationally and smartly and wisely. It's not written anywhere. So you have to demonstrate it somehow. But you have no rock to turn over to say, this proves it makes sense. So you have to make the rational argument that it makes sense.